Okay, so here's the first official Car Talk Thursday video of the year. Because last week's, what day did it come out? It came out like Saturday or Sunday. And again, that was more of like a, let me talk about the last year rather than the last week. I guess a little bit of it is going to be, not even a little bit of it, most of it is just going to be stuff that is upcoming rather than talking about things that have happened. One of them is just kind of, what I want my schedule to be with my big projects. Like last year, for a good chunk of the year, it was Gintama, the Monogatari, and then, I playing Kuro when I was available, playing Reverie when it was available, etc., etc. So right now, my big project is reading Muv-Luv the day after. After that, it's going to be reading Fate Stay Night. I'm going to try to read all 3 routes. Then I want to replay Tales of Symphonia. I don't know if I'm going to get the remaster, or if I'm just going to play the original GameCube version because I already have that. Excuse me. It's really going to come down to what people are saying about the remaster, because from what I understand, it's like a port of the Steam version, I believe, which I think is also a port of the PS3 version, and I think that version only runs at 30 FPS, but the GameCube runs at 60. So if it is just like, no, the GameCube version still runs better, and this version didn't add a lot of new content, I'll probably just say, screw it, I'm just going to replay the GameCube. But if it turns out that the new version actually added a lot of stuff, I'll definitely pick it up. But regardless, it's coming out like mid-February, I believe the 13th. So I'm probably still going to be reading Fate by that time, but I'm hopeful that by the time I'm done reading Fate, I'll have a really good idea of which version of Symphonia I should play. But while those are my main projects, there'll still be some things I do on the side. Like my writing as that's going. Probably like reading a little bit of manga if I'm reading something pretty short. Watching an anime if I'm watching something pretty short. And like right now, I've started Gundam. I don't know if it's actually still called Mobile Suit Gundam, or it's just Gundam, but the Witch from Mercury. Or as I've been calling it, Mobile Suit Utena. Because at least in the first couple episodes, right now, I'm about 2/3 of the way done. I just finished episode 8. At this point, it definitely doesn't feel as Utena as it did in those first couple episodes, but I really like those vibes. Like, I've had the Utena OP I think it was yesterday. It was just stuck in my head all day yesterday because I watched this show the day before. Like, this is very familiar, and not in a sense where I'm like, wow, like, this just feels like it's Utena copy and paste. No. It's Witch from Mercury still definitely has its own identity, even when it... Because, like I said, at this point where I'm at now, it's not as much of Utena. But I would say they still feel like their own things. But it reminded me, it was like, that's right, I watched that show a few years ago, and I did really like it. I don't think it's one of my all-time favorites, but I definitely really enjoy Utena, and I'm enjoying this show a lot, too. It's important to say I'm not a big Gundam fan. Nothing against the series. The only one I've watched is G, and no, take that back, I did watch 00 like a long time ago, but I watched G a couple years back, and I had a lot of fun with it, but from what I understand, it's not a very accurate depiction of what Gundam is, because I know it is very much like an anti-war series, and there's definitely elements of that so far, particularly if you've seen the prologue episode of Witch from Mercury. And from what I know about the ending, it's kind of like that too. Because the way I got into the show is I didn't even realize there was a new Gundam show. But I think it was start of the week, like Monday or Tuesday. I was just seeing a bunch of like art and memes about it on Twitter. And just kind of about the ending. I was like, what are they talking about? So I looked into it, saw the scene, and went, okay. I'm kind of interested in this now. I think I want to give this a shot. And yeah, 2/3 of the way through it, I'm very much enjoying it. I think it looks really pretty. Like the fight scenes. But also, like, the scene when they're eating the tomato in, like, the first episode. That was, like, really pretty for some reason. I really like the way the show looks. I'm enjoying the characters and their interactions. I definitely want to see where it goes, which is kind of weird to say because I saw how it went. But so far, I'm definitely enjoying it. Moving on from that, just the thing I have left is congrats Bulldogs, sucks to be TCU. I've seen a lot of people say, TCU didn't deserve to be there. The fact that Bama was not in the top 4, it's an absolute travesty. I can't believe they did that shit, and I don't agree with that for a second. Bama lost 2 games. And in college football, depending on your schedule, sometimes losing 1 is enough to make it seem like you are not that good of a team and it's a death knell to your season. You can't you can't lose 2 games and not even play in the conference championship and, expect to go to the playoff. TCU had a perfect schedule until the conference championship, in which they lost in overtime. But in that point, it is if you take them out for losing the conference championship, that means they're getting, penalized for playing an extra game, and that's kind of bullshit. But Ohio State was a 1-loss team. TCU was a 1-loss team. That 1 loss being in the conference championship. Michigan, undefeated. And Ohio State's 1 loss was to an undefeated Michigan, which they lost by 22 or something. But it was, that one big loss was, I guess, better than both of Alabama's small ones. And an undefeated Georgia. It definitely was not TCU's day, but they earned it in the regular season, and they earned their championship bid because they beat Michigan, who beat Ohio State, who almost beat Georgia. When you look at it like that, you're like, well, TCU had no business playing Georgia. Oh my goodness, Ohio State, that was the real national championship because of how close it was. Yeah, sure, but the team that almost beat Georgia got the crap beat out of them by the team that lost to TCU, and TCU was kind of in control the entire game. So it's weird how matchups go. You can look at that and say, well, that maybe TCU, for whatever reason, just can't match Georgia. But if they could beat Michigan, then they can certainly beat Ohio State. To me, in my head, it's like saying, well, Charmander beat the absolute dog shit out of that, Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur has no business even being a starter. It's not even on Charmander's level. We're no, yeah, Fire has the really good matchup against Grass, but it has a terrible matchup against Water, which Grass has a good, matchup against. It sucks for TCU that this was not their matchup, but they 100% earned it, man. And anyone who says otherwise, I hard disagree. But while we're on the subject of football, before we get into playoffs, which I'm only going to predict this first round right now, I do kind of want to talk about draft speculation. So currently, the Chicago Bears, the number 1 overall pick in the draft, they also already have a quarterback. They have Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields it seems like he's definitely made some, excuse me, throat's a little dry. A lot of progress and a lot of development this year. And a lot of his skill set, it's a lot like Lamar Jackson. He's an electric athlete, really, really good running the ball. But when it comes to throwing the ball, it definitely seems that it's not. I feel like he's, at this point in his career, a better runner than he is a thrower. But you still get those flashes, and when you have that kind of athletic ability in your QB, you kind of got to do what you can to maximize it. But with the number 1 overall pick, the Bears can trade Justin Fields to someone else who really wants him and pick Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, whichever one they really like number 1 overall. Or they can keep Fields, have someone else who really wants a QB trade up and be all right, give us a haul so we can support Justin Fields. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I was thinking, who do I really get a strong vibe from saying, this is a team that is going to trade up to number 1, and I think it's going to be the Colts. The reason I think the Colts trade up is, number 1, they just need their own dude. They've been renting quarterback rejects from other teams for the past few years. Phillip Rivers, right about to retire, but does the Colts for a year. Carson Wentz, I think that was because it went. They had a few other guys the other years that Luck was gone. There was Brissett. I think Tolson started a game. I don't think he did a whole season. But even Jacoby Brissett, he's been kind of cast off from a few other teams. Didn't really work there. Phillip Rivers, they at least went to the playoffs, went one and done. Then they got Carson Wentz, and that didn't work out, and they could not get rid of him fast enough. Now they're on Matt Ryan, and that went way worse than the Carson Wentz and the Phillip Rivers seasons. I feel like the Colts right now are in a situation where we need to get a guy. This is a guy that we believe in, that we believe we can build around, and this is going to be the next QB face of our franchise savior. Now, I've heard a lot of people kind of talk about, well, this draft class of QBs, there's not really a guy that, you want to move heaven and earth for it. It's like, even if you really kind of like them, it's probably better to wait, because it's like almost every season, it's either this is not a strong group of guys, but it is what it is, or it's like this is one of the best QB classes, of all time. There's almost kind of no room in between. I remember them saying that a lot when Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were in the draft. It was all about this Trubisky guy who I had never heard of. And even though Deshaun Watson played really well and won a national championship, no one really talked that well about him. And then, Mahomes ends up being better than both those guys. But I think, so, essentially that's kind of to say, I've heard people say that, so maybe a team isn't going to be super excited to trade up to number one, trade a bunch of stuff. But I feel like I said, reason number one, the Colts really need to get their own guy in there. And reason number two is because Houston has the number 2 overall pick. The Colts already have to deal with Trevor Lawrence twice a year. The Titans don't really have a guy that makes you go, whoa. I mean, they do. His name is Derrick Henry. But not a quarterback. Not a dude that really scares you as a defense. But Houston, they could get a guy. And I think it really comes down to, if you as the Colts believe in Bryce Young or CJ Stroud and think that's the guy we want, that means he's not a guy you want to see twice a year. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Colts to trade up, get a guy for themselves, and a little addition by subtraction to make sure Houston doesn't get him either. And if you're the Bears, going from number 1 pick to number 4, that's really not so bad. That's really not that bad of a drop. So I feel like they'll probably get the number 4 pick. I know the Bears need some offensive line help. Maybe the Colts have to give up Quentin Nelson. I could see another first, in the next year. And then maybe, because I know Houston has a high second, but they're probably not going to give that one up if they're giving away one of their firsts. Or excuse me, not Houston, the Bears. So maybe the Colts. Maybe the Colts end up giving a third as well. So let's say the number 4 overall pick, a 3rd round pick, Quentin Nelson is a player, and then a first round next year to move up to number 1. If they do that, which that's my prediction. I haven't actually heard anything. There's whoa, this source really says they're doing it. Just kind of taking a cursory look. I'm they're close enough to number 1 that they maybe don't have to give up as much as I've kind of said. But it's something I could see. The Bears would probably be yeah, we can move down not that far and still get some other additional shit. I think it's something that could work for both teams. I haven't looked a whole lot into the whole QB carousel right now. That'll probably be something I do in the offseason. But something I do want to bring up is Derek Carr, because it seems very, very clear he is done with the Raiders. Whether they trade him or they cut him, I don't know. I'm going to say he goes to the Jets. Now, there's a lot of other teams potentially that could try to get Derek Carr, that he could go. But I look at the Jets. This is a team with a good running game, a good defense. Their quarterback their quarterback situation has been awful this year. And I feel what they really want as an organization, again, I'm not someone who actually works there. I don't have eyes and ears inside the building. I feel it's, all right, we took this dude, Zach Wilson, number 2 overall. That's a big investment in a guy, dude, and QB all at once. That's a lot to invest in one dude. We need to make sure he is good. And that goes, we need a franchise guy. We see the potential he has, and we can't give up on it yet. Partly also because he was so bad this year, we're not going to get anything for him if we try to trade him. So I think what the Jets want is to get a veteran guy in that locker room to help Zach Wilson learn and develop, but who can also genuinely win games for them. Because God bless Joe Flacco. I love me some Joe Flacco. Man had probably one of the best postseason runs by a quarterback of all time. Did I say most postseason runs? I don't know if I said that. I meant to say best. Whoops. But regardless, like one of the best postseason runs by a quarterback like of all time. But he's not that good anymore. Mike White was a great story, but he looks okay. I don't think he's that great. I think Derek Carr is an easy upgrade over both those dudes. Here's a guy who knows how to play. He can win games. Now, he can make a lot of mistakes, too. Derek Carr, I think he's like second or tied for third in the league this year in throwing interceptions. That's not good. That's definitely not, a winning recipe for football. But I feel like he can keep the Jets competitive. And I don't think it's that much of a hot take to say he is an upgrade compared to what they currently have in their QB room. But I wanted to go ahead and bring that up. I guess another thing to bring up is the Sean Payton sweepstakes, which again, I'm not really going to go into who I expect to get him at this time. But from what I understand, it is currently the Broncos, the Cardinals, and the Texans. All have permission from the Saints to speak to Sean Payton. Which, if they have permission, I don't know if that means they've already they've already come to a price, or if it just means they've kind of thrown around some terms. And I'm like, we'll figure that out when we figure that out. But yeah, like so far, I feel like we can get something together. I genuinely don't know how that works, but it'll definitely be interesting to play out. Just the QB carousel, the Sean Payton sweepstakes, and the Brady sweepstakes, which is also part of the QB carousel, but I feel like Brady, he's big enough to almost kind of be his own thing. But like I said, we'll probably talk about that in a future video. Do I have anything else to say about the Colts and the Carr thing? That's pretty much it. So now it's playoffs start this week, so I kind of just wanted to go ahead and go through my picks, and they're probably most of them are going to be wrong, given how bad I was at picking games earlier this year, but we'll see how it goes. So the first game is the Hawks at the 49ers. I think the 49ers are going to win this by a big margin. Geno has been a really good story. Yeah, I would have rather the Lions gotten in over the Seahawks, but I mean that is no disrespect to the Seahawks. Lions was just a really fun story, but Geno Smith from week 1, they wrote me off. I didn't write back. I love this. I love this dude. I wish nothing but the best for him. I hope Seattle goes out and wins and has this, crazy big upset and the story gets to continue. But the 49ers look like they might be the best team in the league. Like, this looks like a team that can go all the way. And I really just feel like Seattle's just going to be a bump in the road for them, and the Niners are going to cruise. Next game is the Bolts and the Jags. So the Jaguars have been playing with a lot of confidence. They've been hot. They've won, it's like 5 straight, 6 straight, something like that. And while admittedly the games that I have actually seen, like that Titans game and the Jets game, the offense looks like it has potential. It can be explosive and, really flow. I've also seen Trevor Lawrence throw some awful balls. Not that I could do any better, but I've seen somewhere like that was pretty off target. I just come to that one against the Titans where he had a dude wide open in the back of the end zone, and it was not even close. But, I've also seen him make some pretty good contested throws, too. But here's the thing. Because I know they've got all the momentum, and the Chargers had quite a bit of momentum as well, then that weird game in Denver and the way their starters got handled. I feel like I would roll with Justin Herbert over Trevor Lawrence, but I'm rolling with Dougie Peterson over Brandon Staley. I honestly think even if the Jags offense gets off to kind of a weird start, their defense is going to be able to keep them in the game. Justin Herbert, when it comes to the fourth quarter on fourth down, he is going to make some big throws and just some, huge clutch plays. But I honestly think Brandon Staley comes up with a dumb, boneheaded decision at some point in the game, and it's kind of the turning point of the game. Whether it is something that, this is what ended the game on somewhere in the fourth quarter, or if it's somewhere where, all right, the Chargers are up with a chance to, extend their lead, or they have a chance to tie it, and then some terrible play call, or honestly probably some really bad fourth down decision ends up screwing them over, and that's essentially why they lose. I think that's going to happen. Unfortunately, I don't think he is going to keep his job if that happens, and then they're also going to be in the Sean Payton sweepstakes. But I do have Jacksonville winning. Let's see, the next game, it's the Dolphins and the Bills. The Bills are definitely a mortal team. One of the biggest issues I have with them right now as a team is just how reckless and careless Josh Allen can be with the football. He makes, I know I said, what was the cue? It was Derek Carr. How Derek Carr is second or third in terms of interceptions. I know that Josh Allen isn't that far behind. They might be tied. He might be one ahead or one below. But I was actually surprised. But just kind of as I was remembering a lot of the games this year, it's he actually would throw quite a bit of interceptions, and it was usually in the end zone, in the red zone. And yeah, sometimes it would be in the end zone. I feel like that is going to be the Bills' biggest weakness going into the postseason, and the one thing that can really screw them over. I don't think it's going to matter much here against the Dolphins, because even with that issue, Buffalo still has a great offense, their defense is pretty good, and I feel like they got some very solid special teams. At least from what I have seen, and maybe there's just the recency bias of scoring 2 special teams touchdowns against the Patriots last week. But the Dolphins have been reeling. They don't look good. They look lost. They look like a mess. I don't really know what the situation is for Tua. I hope that man is okay. But, this looks like, I think Buffalo's just going to win big. I think the 49ers are going to win big against the Seahawks, but I feel like there's going to be fight. They're going to try to make it a game. I really don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to. So the next one, that's the Giants and the Vikings. And I'll be honest, I really went back and forth on this one. For me, the Vikings are kind of, this team is going to go one and done, or they are going to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. It's kind of one or the other with just how weird this team is. They either win because it's a really close game and they're able to have that fight and that determination and that grit, or they just kind of get kicked in the dick and then just get their throat stepped on the entire time. And it's what do I trust here? The tough team or the one that gets blown out? And normally when they're getting blown out, it was by other good teams and playoff teams, teams with winning records. It's not good. And then you look at the Giants, you're yeah, this is the kind of scrappy team that's been punching way above their weight class because no one thought they were going to be that good. But here they are, they made it to the playoffs. This is a really impressive season for them. It's yeah. Punching above their weight class. Who have they actually beaten? Who are the good teams they've beaten and played? Washington, I think Washington finished with a winning record, or if not, it's 8-1, so it's a non-losing record or something. I'm well, kind of, because they are in the playoff race. They beat them and tied with them. The Cowboys made it. How did they do against the Cowboys? They lost both times. So the Eagles, same thing with the Eagles. They lost to the Vikings. This is all these games are rematches so far in the playoffs, and I really kind of dig that. But it's they missed. They lost to the Vikings on it was a 60 or 61 yard field goal as time expired. That's a close loss, but it's again, another good team you played that you couldn't beat. one of their most impressive wins is the Packers, and even then, the Packers did not finish with a winning record. I think I wrote down a couple of the other ones that were pretty. Where were the Giants' other games? Okay, there we go. Green Bay is kind of impressive because they were kind of good, but they, ended up finishing with a losing record. The Jaguars are looking good now, but at that point, I remember the Jaguars just kind of hadn't hit their stride yet, so the Giants beating them then, was not as impressive as if they had beaten them now. And just the other team were the Ravens. And this is still, Lamar was there, but even when Lamar was there, the Ravens were still choking games. So even, the most impressive wins that the Giants have aren't that impressive. But I don't know. I've gone back and forth on this one a lot. I'm gonna pick the Giants because I feel like this is gonna be their statement game. The one where, if none of their other games, even the, teams with winning records are close to it that they've beaten, still kind of raise some question marks. I think this is going to be the one where they, I guess, announce their presence, to put it one way. Because, I don't think they're really going to go on a run. But I think this is we are not a fluke. We can beat good teams. We can beat tough teams. We're probably about to get the shit kicked out of us by the Eagles for the third time this season. But we are here. And we're going to be a threat in the NFL seasons going forward. I could be very wrong about this, but it's the pick I made. Ravens Bengals. I think if Lamar Jackson plays, I think the Ravens lose, but I think it's a relatively close game. It's definitely a tight game. If Lamar doesn't play, the Bengals are winning by 30. That's really all I have to say. I know the Ravens have a good defense. They have a very good defense, especially with Roquan Smith. But, without Lamar, that offense is not doing anything. The offense basically becomes a liability. I think the Bengals are just going to eat him alive. They did it last week. And Lamar wasn't there either, man. This is the easiest game to pick. That's all it is. Cowboys and the Bucks. Tom Brady versus the Dallas Cowboys in a playoff game on Monday Night Football. This is going to be one of just the biggest ratings generators of all time. This might end up being the most watched football game of all time. And it's funny to me because I think the game is going to be a total shit show. I think it is going to be very sloppy. Brady is going to have some terrible throws. Dak is going to throw some terrible balls. He's going to throw a pick six at some point. I talked about Carr and Allen and how they're, really high on the interception list. I know Dak is tied with Davis Mills for the lead, which I think was 17. And he missed 5 games. And I know not all those interceptions are his fault. The one when he was throwing the ball to Noah Brown against the Jags, he hit his guy right on the chest. His dude couldn't catch it. That is not on Dak. But when you're tied for the league lead in interceptions after missing 5 games, that is pretty bad. That's really bad. This is not a game where I feel like it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a competitive game, but not because, man, these are two really good teams. It's just every time someone does anything, the other person can match it. It really just is. They both kind of, the Cowboys don't suck. They're just really sloppy. We saw it last week against Washington too. And I feel like it's going to be some kind of weird Brady voodoo magic that gives them the win in the end. But ultimately, I think the Bucs are going to win this game. So I've got Bucs, Giants, Bengals, Bills, 49ers, and the Jaguars. Essentially just picking the home teams plus the Giants, but it's kind of what I'm feeling for right now. We'll definitely see how it goes next week, or this weekend, and I look forward to it. I'm really excited to see who's going to win everything this year.